Yes. All right. We are live. Natalia, what's up?
How are you? I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah,
I
me
love it.
too. This is like our first live stream that we do for something we call Composable without compromise. And so we already have 2 people watching, and I'm really excited.
Yeah,
So
me too.
to get this started, maybe say your name. So it's supposed to be said in Spanish because I will butcher it. So I'll let you say your name properly. And can you then
Okay.
also explain what you do and where you work, things like that?
Okay, so I'm Natalia Venditto because that's an Italian name actually.
Exactly. I was
And
just thinking.
but I was born in Uruguay in South America,
Okay.
and now I live in Barcelona, and I work for Microsoft. And basically, my role is program manager, which in Microsoft is a like the role you give to a role that does too many things,
Everything.
or well, a bunch of things that are difficult to describe or to give a
Hmm.
name to. And basically, I work in the developer division. And what we do is we do developer tools. We own VS Code, for example, all
Wow.
the VS Code extensions. And then we own the CLIs that connect code to cloud. And we also, obviously, because it's Azure, we own a few services that front-end developers or JavaScript developers can deploy their JavaScript to. And
Hmm.
what I do as a program manager, I own JavaScript in Azure. So I make sure that the developer experience for anyone working with JavaScript in Azure, doesn't matter what service, even uh, even in intersection with M365 and
Hmm.
the Linux distribution of Microsoft, Mariner.
Oh, the WSL, of course.
Um, so I oversee the developer experience
Hmm.
and write the strategy that we implement to make sure that everyone is happy. That's what I
Wow.
do.
That is something. That's a lot. And also,
Yeah.
you're kind of our go-to if we want something, I
Right.
guess.
Yes. If you want
Wow, be
something in
careful.
Azure, yeah, exactly. In Azure Functions, container apps, static web apps, app service. Those are like my main focus. Also Cosmos DB. Well, you have to talk to me. There is no way around
Amazing.
that.
I love it. So in the context of this stream, what we want to be doing in this series is I also want to go a little bit about the industry news. So how about I'll share that now, and maybe if you have any comments on it, I'd love to hear your opinion also. So here we
Absolutely.
go. And so basically in the industry news of like the last month, kind of, I decided not to take too many things because there's so much going on. But
Wow.
this one I saw yesterday that Algolia actually bought Search.io. And
Mm,
that's pretty interesting because Algolia was doing pretty well. And now they also got Search.io because they have something called neural search, which sounds very
okay.
magical. How does this translate to Azure Search, do you think?
That translates to cognitive services SDKs that we
Okay, okay.
use to enable artificial intelligence in search capabilities. So we do
Mhm.
have a compatible or analogous
There you
service.
go. I'm thinking every news item I have, you have something like, oh yeah, but we do that as well.
And by the way, I also work with these case and
Oh,
cognitive
that's
services.
cool. Nice.
Yeah.
And so then we also saw that Gartner, which is basically in the space of where we operate, they are kind of like they do lots of research and they figure out what are the trends, how things work. And they released something called a hype cycle report last month. And
Okay.
there's lots of things in there where they say, okay, the hype that is going on now, there are like 4 or 5 of those. And the interesting thing is, if you look at where Uniform sits and also what we're talking about today about the composability stuff, it's one of the biggest hypes is actually going from the monoliths to a composable whatever, composable code to composable front end to composable architectures. And so it's kind of cool that we at Uniform kind of are figuring out how this all works right as Gartner is actually figuring out that it exists. And so that's
Absolutely.
it's a
Yeah.
cool place to be. We just have to be very fast so everybody starts to understand what this means, right? Um, and then yet another one, a Cloud 100. Have you ever heard of that? Actually, to me, it
No.
was new. It
Yeah.
turns out
Yeah.
Forbes looks at like cloud native companies, SaaS companies, and figures out, okay, who has the most impact or has the most innovative services, things like that. And I put this in here because Uniform has a whole bunch of partners, and I think almost all of them are in here. And
Wow.
so why not share this with them? Because it's not an easy thing to get in there because there's a lot of SaaS companies.
Yeah, and
Right?
I think that was very necessary because we were always looking at the 100 in enterprise or
Yeah,
500 in enterprise, but cloud is a big part of the business ecosystem, and
exactly.
we should really give some or highlight the work that is done there.
Exactly. And I can bet that a lot of these companies use the Azure cloud for these things.
Absolutely, I'm
Yeah.
very certain of it.
Yeah, exactly. And then this one just happened. And when I wrote this slide, it wasn't fully sure yet if Adobe was buying Figma, which is like an amazing creative tool that basically we use all the time. And actually now it's actually real. It's true. So they spent 20 billion.
Wow.
That is, wow, that's amazing. I love
But
it.
I think it's worth it. Figma
Oh,
is an
yes. And
amazing tool.
interestingly, there was a few articles not written by Adobe themselves or by Figma that were talking about, the go-to market of Adobe this year. And in these first few quarters, they actually dropped a lot of revenue, like a third of what they had last year, because
Wow.
everybody was starting to use tools like Figma and InVision and other things. And
I
so
personally use it all the time. It's one
all
of
the
my,
time.
yeah, one
And
of my go-to tools, right?
and what I love about it, like I'm not really a designer. I can do it, but it's not my job. And I still use it a lot. And so they
Yeah.
kind of normalize design tools. And so it's very smart of Adobe to buy them. If people are happy, I don't think so. But we'll have to wait out how long it takes before Adobe is on the logo,
I
right?
always I always say we need to give the chance to demonstrate what they want to do with it.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
I like that. And I think it's not Photoshop. It's just different. And I think Figma, if they're smart, they get all these amazing people at Adobe that work in all these teams to get that knowledge and put Photoshop like features and AI stuff inside the tool, and then they win. So
By the
good for
way,
them.
my mentor as an architect, because right now I work as a program manager, but
Hmm.
that encompasses being an architect, being an engineer. And my mentor for a great part of my career, he's
Hmm.
now a CTO at Adobe. He's not the
There you go.
CTO, but he's CTO for one of their um, departments.
It must be
And
amazing to work there because imagine doing the web version of Illustrator or something like that. It must
wow,
be intense to build that and very cool to
mind
do.
blowing. Yeah.
Exactly. Let's not hang too long because I want to hear what you're going to talk about soon. So I want to also talk about a little bit what we do at Uniform, not the whole thing because that's a lot of talking, but also there's a few new things, right? And so just recently, that's actually like 2, 3 weeks ago, we have officially now released the fact that we work with different versions of edge functionalities, of middlewares and things like that. And we're secretly really hoping and waiting for Azure to use these things as well. And so I know, I'm sorry, but like our customers are asking, and we're now just diverting a bit and do it here. And it works everywhere really, really well. And so we're excited to announce this officially now that we have the Akamai one, Cloudflare, and Vercel, and Netlify, and soon Azure, I imagine. Um, and then this one is
Okay.
close to my heart, where this is a little bit older already, where we actually have our whole SDK working in Nux 3 as well including all the fancy new stuff of the Nitro engine, right? So it can go to all the clouds and all the the edge functionalities. And I think when we were both on a conference in Barcelona, you saw me fail at it because it was like pre-alpha,
I
but
think you
now it's all
succeeded
there.
at it. You did a great
Oh,
demo.
I know where I failed, when I went to Netlify and that crashed there. And it's
Uh,
probably human error though. So anyways, let's not dwell on that part. It was a fun conference to me
and I
because I
think,
met you there.
yeah, same. And I want to say that we're going to talk about distributed systems and micro frontends and
Mhm.
composability. And I think that one of the challenges we're going to see is debugging systems
Oh yes.
that are living on different execution runtimes and across clouds. So yeah,
You
takes
make
time
the
to figure
perfect bridge. How about that?
Yeah, and these are the ideas and tools for new cloud architectures. But I'm not here to present on my own. I'm here to have a conversation with you because we
Yeah.
have similar backgrounds. Like I was an architect before. I was an engineer before, a front-end developer for many years, too many. And yes, we were chatting, and that was amazing because we were chatting and we realized that we had the same pains and we had the same
Yes.
challenges and also the same joys. We're not going to talk only about the negative stuff.
Well,
Yeah,
if you work in the thing that we worked in, we know what it means to do something at scale. And if it succeeds, it has an insanely huge impact, right? So it can be
absolutely.
amazing to work at that scale. It's also challenging, but that's what you're going to talk about a bit today, right? How you can solve that stuff.
Absolutely. So I'm not going to reintroduce myself because I already did. But we're going to start talking about Monolith. So I'm sure, Tim, you remember those
Yes.
big blocks, rocks, mountains of code and capabilities. And yeah, we basically had it all together. Like everything was a big application, like consolidated
Yes.
in usually a single repository, and had like massive teams working on it. And then we had to come up with all those complicated release cycles and yeah, integration models. Back in that time, or back at the time, I don't think that we considered CI/CD to be very efficient for us, because
Oh
that
no. I've had crazy things like where I bought our boss walked into the room. It's like, why are you playing foosball or metegol in your language? And yeah, I had Argentinian colleagues. It's almost how you would say it, but they're like, "Why are you playing that?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, Sidecore is building, and the release is happening on CI/CD." It's like, "Oh, it's fine. I'll see you in an hour." That was normal.
absolutely,
That was
yeah,
completely normal. And
yeah.
we're talking 2 years ago here. That's not that long ago.
Yeah, when you have like a compiled language and in the backend typically, and you have those massive applications, it can take anything from it can take 4 hours to compile it.
Oh yeah,
Really, seriously, it's not a joke. So obviously, right now that's not acceptable for the kind of dynamics we have at the development cycles mapped to agile
yeah,
methodologies, etc. But that was how it was back in the day, and it worked. And then you had this layered architecture composing this monolith, and the infrastructure was owned by a team, always the system engineers. I don't think we were back in the day talking about DevOps. That wasn't a thing yet.
Hmm.
We had the system engineers, and then we had people that were very skilled with databases, and they owned the databases, the database administrators, and
Yeah.
then the backend developers own the data access and the business logic. And the front end was like an afterthought. Back in the day, it was
Oh
like, oh,
yeah.
we are going to make things pretty and move pixels around, and that was basically the idea. Many of our colleagues in other with other concerns had of us. But basically, we were very, very much limited by whatever architecture and methodologies decisions were
Yeah.
made by anybody in those layers at the
In the
bottom.
whole chain.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
I remember we would have to do like a quick fix for some CSS because people couldn't click on the buy button or something. And we would actually fix it, but then not release it, because one release would sometimes for this project take 24 hours. Because all the systems that are so big, there was multiple monoliths that had to sync kind of. And so we would wait for a week to release it. So there were more front-end fixes in the chunk. But then it means there was a week of people not clicking on the buy button. It's like,
Yeah, a
that
lot
was
of
kind of a
money
normal
lost.
thing.
Yeah, and when we had something like a release model implementing a hotfix, for example, that meant, and I don't know if that's in the next slide, because yeah, I haven't seen these slides for a while, but yeah, we meant we had interdependencies, knowledge silos, slow time to value, technical debt, and lack of innovation, all bound to this. And I was going to talk about the hotfixes, for example.
Yeah.
A hotfix means that you have to bump the version of the whole monolith.
Yeah.
So you cannot just introduce some code just like that. You need to release a new version of the whole application with the consequence.
Have you ever done it before, that when you are going to the live server, to the compiled code that is hosted in your monolith, and do the change there? Have you ever done that before?
Absolutely.
Oh,
No.
yeah, me too.
No,
No, of
never.
course not.
That's not
Never.
something developers do.
Oh,
I
we
mean,
have done scary shit like that.
you have worked in Adobe Experience Manager like me,
Yes.
right? And so Adobe Experience Manager is basically a Java content repository. So it doesn't have a database. It has nodes that map to Java classes, sometimes to content nodes. And what we used to do is we went to the CRX in prod and change whatever code or value or whatever we needed to change, because that was the only way. We didn't have to wait for a new release or to integrate a hotfix. Yeah. And then we would download the package from the Felix console and name it after the bag or Jira ticket. And then we had to remember for the next release that we needed to include that code, because we could cause a regression if we forgot about it. So those were the not so happy times.
Exactly. But then if it works, this stuff is quite stable. It's not that fast, but it works.
Yeah. And also the customer were happy that we didn't have to wait so long because you say sometimes it costs money. If you cannot click on the buy button, then you are preventing their end customers to have a good experience and do what they have to do. So yes, it's important to remember these interdependencies as well. Like if you have a huge monolith, a change you may be doing here may be impacting in places you didn't even imagine. And then the knowledge silos, because it's so large, then we have people that only know about one feature or another, and you have to wait for them to give you, I don't know, clues on what may be wrong. So it's really complicated. It's sometimes the right architecture for some kind of applications. That's something that we might also agree with or admit, but it's really, really complex and not for the faint of heart, really.
Exactly.
And yes, and during this conference in Barcelona, I explained that in 2019, I was working with Adobe Experience Manager. We had this big monolith, and I wanted to use modern frontends for a while already. Like I had applications, right? We had several different applications that were embedded, like the whole application, the whole SPA in one page of Adobe Experience Manager. Yeah. But I wanted to have something more decoupled. And yes, I was a technical lead at the time. Obviously, I had to have the crucial conversation with the architects, the backend architects. I want to use micro frontends, right? And Some people didn't even know what that was back
So
in the day.
maybe like I feel like sometimes micro frontends is explained in different ways. How would you explain it? Is it like islands architecture that is now a thing suddenly, or is it
I
different?
think I think islands architecture is a flavor of micro frontends, but it's not the
Okay.
definition of micro frontend.
Hmm.
It's a very good implementation of micro frontends, but not the only one.
Yeah, exactly.
That's more like a horizontal kind of distribution of components, but you can have vertical ones. Like you go to one URL and you are bootstrapping a whole application, and that may be a micro frontend, the whole
Yeah.
application thing.
But
And
what I'm
obviously,
always worried about with these things is like, okay, I need to go to, let's say, as a user, I have to go to 4 different things to do whatever in an e-commerce, something complex. So you might have 4 micro front ends, and I'm going to load the whole front end bundle for that micro front end every time. And then if
yeah,
this is slow, it's a bad experience for me. And how is the state maintained between these micro front ends? And those things make it pretty hard, right? How would you solve
absolutely.
that?
Yeah, absolutely. That state management, identity, all those things are the most complex problems that you have to solve when you are implementing a micro architecture,
Yeah, anything. Yeah, yeah.
micro asterisk architecture, right? And yeah, it comes with other challenges like versioning, like knowledge ramp. Like, what are you gonna version? Because we said, like, yeah, if you hotfix or you do a new release of a monolith, you have to bump the version, right?
Yeah.
When you make changes to part of it, like one micro frontend, do you just bump the version for that micro frontend? Would that be using dependencies? Like if you're using module federation, for example, and you're
Oh, yeah.
using and you're using shared scope, are you going to be how you solve that? Like you may have to bump the version for a dependency as well. That is a dependency of another micro frontend, right? So then the knowledge ramp, again, the state management, the data architecture, because this is where you have to think, oh, one database for the whole micro frontend ecosystem or system, or one database per micro frontend. Then you have governance and obviously orchestration, how you put all together and make it work. And yeah, I think my take is that the first thing you need to look into is governance. Like that's the key to succeed. But anyway, when I went and talked to my architect back in the day, they told me, "Oh, you're into
What is
hype-driven
happening?
development."
I love your slide.
Yeah, that's what they tell you. Like, oh, that's hype. No, we don't do this. We
Hype
stick
driven
to
development. A little bit.
HTTP. But there are, and so you have to come and convince them that there are advantages. And I always say,
Mhm.
like, the advantages are not only for the technology or in terms of technology, it's also in terms of people, right? That have their lives enhanced by this kind of decoupling, and that they can specialize and they can work in smaller teams and they can work faster and more dynamically. And obviously, the processes may be simplified because you don't have to worry about such a huge application anymore. And you can also have different processes that are suitable for each micro part.
So, what's actually interesting about that fact, about this governance related thing with the people, I'd never considered this until, let's say, 6 months ago. To me, it was okay, you go to these new technologies, you're going to make a better front end website, right? Your whole thing is better. But that's not only the thing you're going to win with. You can actually go to all this new technology and build a crappy website, but the internal governance is amazing. Because what
Yeah.
we used to see all the time with the time of the monolith or the systems that were not nicely connected, when your boss says, "Oh, I want a wish list for this Christmas," and you
Yeah.
might be like, "Oh, maybe in 6 months we might be able to do it." But then when you have all these nice composed architecture things together in smaller chunks, Suddenly it's like you want it this week or next because I can just find the thing and connect it, right? And you can do the same
Absolutely.
thing in code idea. And so actually IT teams in these big companies are now lovable again, rather than, oh crap, this guy is just not going to be able to do it for us. And that's a
Absolutely.
huge difference in business. And then it helps that whole governance thing. You can, now I describe this as a relatively high level architecture choice, right? But you can do the same with code and smaller teams and be more agile between these teams.
Absolutely, absolutely. The interaction between teams is one thing. The interaction between the members of the team, everything changes in this
Yeah,
model, and you have to account for it. And by the way, those are the greatest advantages, right? You enable those independent teams to make their own decisions. You facilitate the scalability process or guarantee
exactly.
it.
Yeah,
You make maintenance easier because everyone is focused on their tiny part. Of course, they have to think about how we're going to orchestrate this, but if something breaks in your own microservice or micro frontend, it's just something small to, or simple to, simple, no, simple is a bad word. Uh,
yeah,
Smaller, a smaller problem and a smaller challenge. And yeah, you can distribute the workloads. Again, like I was mentioning, maybe for this micro frontend, the right database, because it's, I don't know, it's a scoreboard. So let's have time-based databases behind it. And
exactly.
maybe for this is a blog, so we can have document model. And then you have other, I don't know, types of content that can map to a different model of database, or even skills in the team. Like you have a group of very skilled SQL developers, you can have a database that maps to those
Yeah.
skills as well.
It makes it very interesting. I had a friend a while back, a few years. He went to a new company, he became the CTO, and he started to do this for his architecture. But it was very new back then. And he actually hired Python developers, he hired PHP developers, front-end Node people. They would make their own microservices and small apps in their
Right.
team the way they did it the best. They just had a little contract that said, this is the way of the output and that's your KPI for performance. Nowadays, you would maybe say use GraphQL so the contract is easier. Back then, that wasn't the thing.
Right.
But it's very cool that you have that flexibility, right? If you have star players in C sharp, why not utilize them for something like this?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that I don't know if I speak about this later. Well, this is about the hot fix because we kind of talked about it before,
Yeah.
but um, yeah, I lost track of, yeah, I went to that slide and lost track. But
We just go to
basically,
the next. It's all good.
yeah, we go to the next. It doesn't. No, I was going to say, yeah, now I know what I was going to say. When you are distributing your, or when you are decoupling your monolith and working in a distributed system, it's better to adopt a kind of architecture that is API first for that same reason,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Because you shouldn't have to worry about the API anymore. You should have like something like a gateway in the middle or a management um, capability,
Yeah.
and then it doesn't really matter what is the database. In the end, you have an API contract, and your applications are all going to talk to these APIs. So yeah, we already discussed this, but again, my challenge when speaking to these architects, because they were typically, and that was the case usually until, I don't know, a few years ago, most architects had a backend background,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
So when they thought about decoupling or splitting apart a big application, they usually, like, let's imagine an application is it's an object, it's something that you can look at. They typically, if this is the front end and this is the back end, they typically would look at it from the back end. So how can I, oh,
Yeah, I'm just putting you big so you can show the object you were showing.
Oh yeah, well, I am not showing anymore. I just
Oh,
wanted
okay,
to
okay.
just.
No, we go
Oh,
like
look.
this. We're good. Oh, there you
So
go. Oh, angular. There we go.
so you can yeah, we used to have them think about decoupling from this perspective, right, from the backend. So they thought about decoupling into microservices, and the monolithic front end continued to be part of the architecture in that way. And that worked as well, because if you have a good component system and you have atomic components, you can also compose a monolithic front end, and it
Exactly.
works. But the build times will be longer. And also, again, we're having the same issues. You change you have to really have a good strategy and a good style guide, for example, to make sure that your front end works good when it's still a very large set of components that you're serving. And so this is basically how it worked. Like, you had the monolithic backend, you had the monolithic frontend, and they split it into microservices, still with that monolithic frontend on top.
Exactly.
And what is this? I don't know, because maybe I had some clicking thing. So sorry about the slides
No, it's
being
all good.
repeated.
So in the
But
end, we are also going to split up the front end, and that's kind of what this looks like, right?
yeah, so this is what happens when the decoupling is done by front-end architects, right? You are thinking more about the user in the end, about the user experience, about the UI, right? I hope, because I still see a lot of debate sometimes on Twitter about wanting to adopt a technology because the technology is amazing for the developers.
Yes, you
And
see
I
that all
work
the
in
time.
Yeah, and I work in developer experience. I agree that we should have a good time when we are working, because it's a stressful job.
Yeah.
It's very it has a lot of cognitive overload, and the more you can reduce that cognitive overload and make things simpler, and the better, right? But the end user, should always be central to everything and have more importance, and more be more priority than
Yes,
anything else.
exactly.
So when front-end architects decouple a monolith, they think about the user, and this was basically the origin of micro frontends. What is more effective, optimal, performant, etc., for an end user in a particular case? And yeah, what we want to do is go from achieving balance to achieving independence, and every use case deserves its own architecture and tech stack. So you have a use case, and that's basically the user story as well. What do I need to do? What is the problem I need to solve in this case for the business and for the user? And then make architecture decisions in a nice architecture matrix, tech definitions, have a whole development cycle defined, and explore different build and deployment options depending on the use case. It's not
Yeah.
one fits all anymore.
No, exactly. Everything is very specific to a use case, and therefore it can work really well from governance to a front end to an end user, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is basically what happened when we were working in those monolithic applications, that we had when we look at the front end setup, we had a common set of components. We had the HTML, the HTML engine or render engine or whatever. And even if you had different page types that did different things, like a very dynamic homepage, you had a landing page that was changing all the time, or lived only for a while. You had a blog page that was always the same, or you had a user page that was very, very state bound. Everything was served by the same JavaScript and HTML and whatever styles loaded. What we need to aim at right now is to have this kind of structure for our architecture, right? So depending again on page type and the problem we want to solve for the end user, the architecture and tech definitions that we're going to have enable that solution. So yeah, basically that's
So
that.
if you look at this, do you think it's harder for developers to understand, or maybe it's only harder because they used to the old thing? What do you think?
I think that the Jamstack has done a great work to enable architecture thinking in developers, in front-end
True.
developers. Like before, we weren't very aware of what were the mechanisms that make our sites work, and until you were at a certain stage in your career,
True.
right? You were very focused in the component, in the UI, in the styling. I think right now, because of all the technological innovations and the emerging technologies and patterns and architectures, we are more aware of this. I am not sure everyone understands what should be the right architecture for their use case, but this is something that, yeah, typically developer advocates and other folks
Yeah,
that,
we kind of have to explain this because
yeah.
what I love about this now, when you look at Next and Nuxt, and to a certain degree, the new kids on the block, like Astro and SvelteKit and stuff, what
Mhm.
they do is like their base is really solid. So if you don't understand anything and you build a website with it, you're like 80% there. It's actually 80% of an amazing project out of the box. And so you don't even have to think too much about, hey, which bundles am I going to output just for my blog page? Like in the new Nux 3 instance, for example, you literally just, it's smart enough to output bundles specifically for certain things that it deals with. And it's always a statically generated site, no matter what
Yeah,
you do, but it dynamically goes on top and then it mixes it up completely depending on where you host it. And you don't even have to know anymore. But then when you want to make the blog SSG and something else SSR, you can just make that choice and do it. And
exactly. Yeah,
so it almost feels like people my age have too much knowledge. We don't even need to know anything anymore. You just go for it. Like I still
yeah,
have all this IE6 stuff in my brain that I have to understand. Right? There's no need for it anymore. But
right,
I'm happy I have it because I've been doing this for a while to see how cool this is. Right? If you just
right.
start new, it feels normal, but it's not normal. It's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. I think it's going to come a time when developers don't, or front-end developers, full stack or Jamstack, how you want to call them, they don't need to think about this anymore
Yeah.
either, because, well, my opinion, my humble opinion, is that we're gonna move again to a consolidation or standardization of patterns like we had before. Like right now, we have different ways of doing things.
Exactly.
But it's going to come to a point when we probably are going to have only the last two, right? In the front end.
Probably, and something in between, like if you want to, like if there's a small change in your SSG stack of one page out of 20, it will quickly render just that one,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
kind of an on-demand kind of thing. But it's going to be around those, and the SSR bit, I think, is going to go to the edge. There will
Oh,
not be any
absolutely.
origin servers anymore.
Absolutely. I think that's absolutely the future. And then you would have probably microservices, containerized microservices that
Mhm.
serve multiple applications, again, through an API contract or an API standard, but it's going to be to serve massive kind of very distributed applications, like, I don't know, Twitter or something like this,
Yeah,
right? So
exactly.
then you need more power because you're doing a lot more data processing and computing. But for smaller to medium applications, I think we're going to be doing this data request on the fly, render on the fly, composability on the fly, and yeah, caching whatever is possible, obviously. But many things are going to move to the edge, and not only the edge of the network, the edge of the client. Like we're gonna have interoperability figured out between devices and the network.
Well, the
And
devices have service workers already that you can do
yeah,
stuff with.
yeah,
For example,
definitely.
Nux3, the new runtime, it runs locally on my browser if I want to, which is crazy.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think at a more at a broader scale and more standardized, like more of an industry standard. And yes, and this is when we're also going to be constantly, I think, porting and or swapping data processing or data computing between the edge and the client all the
Yeah.
time. And
Yeah, I
that's
think the
going
whole
to,
edge thing
yeah,
is gonna be it, because then suddenly, based on where our user is and their context that the edge knows about, you can do personalization very easily as well.
absolutely. But to get to that point, we also have to solve other issues probably, or some other, they're not issues, but they're just how the internet works today, the networks and the protocols we have at our disposal. When we have a broader adoption and availability of certain protocols for everyone, or for
Yeah.
the most part of people. Not everyone will have access to internet ever, unfortunately, but yeah, when we have the largest population having access to a certain types of protocols, then it's going to be easier to standardize this type of architectures.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that's my take on things. And this is
Cool.
when back in the day, I started speaking about Azure Static Web Apps. And this is an interesting thing that I am going to take the moment to, do a plug. Azure has these static web apps that is a Jamstack dedicated service, right? And
Yes.
we know that not long ago, Heroku decided to be done with the free tier, and so you cannot deploy applications to a free tier anymore. And when people were recommending other services where developers could migrate their workloads, they never mentioned Azure. Azure is actually, it has a free tier for static web apps, and it's fully integrated with GitHub. So there's GitOps and
Yeah, yeah.
GitHub Actions
Well, what
and
I
also
noticed that people
serverless.
tend to forget about Azure Static Web Apps is that it's integrated very closely with Azure. As in, if you need authentication or something else that there's a service that exists in Azure, you'll be able to just get it. Because if you
Absolutely.
now go to another system and do this, you will not be getting all these things. And so
Absolutely.
somehow that marketing failed. I don't know what happened there. I'm not sure if it failed at all. Like, how much is this used?
It is broadly used. It is
Okay,
broadly
so that's
used.
just me then.
Um, I agree with you that we probably need to raise awareness, um, but it is very, very used in
Oh, cool.
in certain um, enterprise context. I think that where
Mhm.
because they know about it, it's part of
Yes.
the Azure offer, and if they are using other services, obviously they want to integrate and have the full pack. But it's true that we need to make developers more aware of these amazing capabilities that we have with us. And this
Yeah,
is
I
what
have
I
the
work.
feeling it might be a slight hump to go on to, because Azure sounds like this enterprise amazing thing that has everything, which it does. It's really cool. But maybe that alone for beginning developers might be a bit of a big step. I can kind of
Yeah,
imagine it. But I'm sure you're going to show us some CLI action that is
yeah,
very simple to do, and then suddenly there's no hump anymore.
absolutely. So I wanted to show this. I did this live demo at the at this conference as well, and but we also have an amazing VS Code extension that allows you
Oh,
to
yeah.
create and to build and to deploy, or to provision and deploy a static web app without ever leaving VS Code. So we know that developers love VS Code, right? And
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Let's be clear.
that
I have not considered anything else for a long time since VS Code came out.
absolutely me neither. So I used to work with other editors, and that I don't even consider it anymore. So
Exactly.
this is basically the architecture that we want to implement. So we have the code, we have the GitHub actions, and we are going to create a CI/CD pipeline so we can build and deploy our code and provision the actual Azure Static Web Apps resource to Azure. And what happens is that also Static Web Apps has APIs out of the box. So if you write a node function, a Node.js function, in a folder called API, it's going to automatically create the resource for you.
Oh, that was
You
my
know,
next question. Oh, nice. So that's relatively easy, just like when you use Next.js and you upload it to Vercel, that works. It's the
absolutely.
same. Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's just detecting that there is an API there and creating the resource for you and deploying
Oh
it.
no, look at this. Jiri is saying WebStorm rules, which it actually does, but maybe not with this crowd here.
I mean, I used to
It's
use
actually great. I've used it before as
many
well.
IntelliJ. Yeah, I used to use IntelliJ products. I don't like bashing anybody because I did a great amount of usage of those products and
Mhm.
enjoy them, and they were good for me at the time. But once I discovered VS Code, I mean, the amount of extensions you have in VS Code against any potential provider or service,
Yeah.
or anything you want to do, LinkedIn, I don't know, whatever,
Well,
very
what I kind of
dedicated.
like about something like WebStorm is that it's a little bit more IDE driven. Like it's a
Yeah,
little bit more intelligent, like you would have in Visual Studio, basically. But it's in that sense it works really, really well. But I kind of like the lightness
yeah,
of my
definitely,
code editor, personally.
definitely.
So we have about like 10 minutes. You want to maybe
Okay.
just show that stuff, or is this more important to go over? What do you think?
No, this is just, again, what happens under the hood when you are creating a static web app. And yeah, and the misconception of
Hmm.
it not being so easy, right? So let's sure that it's actually easy if you use the right tool, and we have the right
Exactly.
tool.
Because
So
I remember giving a conference talk a few years ago, and I had never used Azure. I had never used the serverless functions and stuff. And back then it was in version 2, so it all just came out. And I had I had Visual Studio. So I had $140 of money in Azure back then. So I started trying it. And I had this aha moment of, oh, the internet is actually so different than I thought it was when with my Monolith hat on back in the day. You could do so many cool things now. Oh my God, I loved it. It was really like it opened up all these possibilities. And actually, my first experience with all this was before Azure Web Apps existed, but it did have this all this Azure with serverless functions and stuff. All right,
wow.
we go.
And we're gonna go from creating a project. I did this at the conference. Like,
I remember.
I
Okay, so
hope
we're going to
I hope
install
I.
Vue. Okay, cool, cool.
So yeah, we call it Azure View project, and let's hope I'm logged in everywhere, because that was something that we were discussing before the streaming.
Yeah, exactly.
But
It
I
is how
wasn't
these
sure
things
I
go.
was logged in everywhere. So I'm gonna say no, 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 for the sake of brevity. And now it tells me, like, this is the I'm still using, right, npm or whatever. No, it tells me, okay, now run this cd blah blah blah. Let's go
Yeah.
there. I thought I was already in the Azure CLI, then I realized it's too late for me. Let's let's install it.
Yeah, install first. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because the other time I think I did, I also got confused by this, and I was like, oh,
Yeah, I remember that.
I'm already in the Swazi CLI. I was like, no, I'm not. I'm just creating the application. I'm
How
not
about
a
that?
view.
Was so fast.
I'm not a view user. Well, this is Vite, right?
Yes, exactly. And it was not
Okay.
a big package, I think.
No. This is like the default. That
Yeah.
okay. So we are going to open a new tab, and we're going to run SWA. That's all we need to run. Static web apps.
Oh, static web apps. Okay, here we go.
It tells me that there wasn't a configuration file, and so it runs SWA init. Let's actually open code so we can see it. So we have the Vite configuration, and okay, was expecting it did add the configuration, but it's okay.
Yeah, well, you haven't run the init yet, right?
Because it's asking me to choose a configuration.
Yeah,
name.
exactly.
Okay.
I think if you go, now you
Okay.
probably have it. So
Yeah.
you just say yes
now
now, I imagine. It
yeah.
probably hasn't rendered it yet.
And so no, it's asking me if the settings are correct before it writes
Oh,
the
that's
file.
cool.
Right?
And it seems like they are.
And by the way, have you seen it's detecting the framework?
Yeah, that's very cool. I love that.
And it's telling me like, oh, this is the app location, this is the output location, the API location. I don't have an API right now, but
not yet.
These are the things that then we're going to use also for the actions, right? For the workflow. So yes, they are correct. And this is when this is when it creates the configuration over here, right?
Okay. Oh yeah, there it is. Perfect. So that's not super complicated. Actually, this was like 5 things you had to do or less.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So
only
you can already
because,
deploy. Look at that.
Yeah. So it tells me, do you want to deploy your application now? Let's hope I am logged in and there is no. So it's running. It's asking me, okay, what's your tenant? That's my tenant for my subscription. It successfully logged me into Azure.
Yeah, so there you go. Oh, and it's doing an
I'm not doing
now,
I'm not doing anything, right? Authentication complete.
Whoa.
Would you like to create a new Azure Static Web Apps project? Is it seen? Yeah. So I say, yeah, let's go. Choose a name, because maybe I wanted to be called something else. I actually could have added a prefix NV. I usually do this, so then I don't have to search my resources all over the place.
Yeah, exactly.
And
so what is it downloading now? What is this?
Oh, it's downloading a binary that is the static site client, but this is because I had it outdated, because I had not used this for a while. But if I had it updated, that wouldn't even happen. So this is going to take a bit.
Gonna like people commenting like that stuff. I paid. What's up? Nice to see you.
So it's in progress. What it's doing right now is provisioning the resource for me. I didn't do anything. I didn't go to the portal. I didn't do absolutely.
This is huge for me, because when I go to the Azure portal, I don't know what to do. So that's cool. Oh, it's done. How about that?
Project complete, deployed to. Blah, blah, blah. Let's go and. Well, actually, you did it.
Holy shit. Oh, sorry. I shouldn't be saying these things because we might have American viewers. But between us Europeans, awesome. How about it? That just worked. And so how can you now manage this stuff? Or maybe you don't have to. Like if you now do an update in your code, do you just run an update thing in your CLI and it's done?
You have all this information. Let's go to the SWA CLI. But ideally, what you want to do right now is you want to push this to GitHub, right? And create a workflow file over there.
Okay.
And so deploy. if I had these are the multiple options that we can pass. Like if I had, for example, an API, I could also start it, or I could define the distribution
Okay, so you
from
can kind
there.
of choose a little bit more, and you choose your node version, things like that. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So what you're asking me basically is if it's going to be watching what I do,
For
right?
example, yes.
I don't know. Let's check. Let's check this part. Let's change a component. You've successfully created a project with blah, blah, blah.
Yes, exactly. Cool. Okay, let's
But
see what now. So now there's a change. So how I would do this now in my normal workflow, I would just push this to Git, and because there's a
exactly,
change in Git, something
exactly.
listens on the other end and it just rebuilds, right?
So what I would do right now is like just, it doesn't have, right? It's already. So I would just push it to Git. I don't know if I'm logged into GitHub. So
Yeah,
I'm
we
not
don't
going
have to
to,
do it now, but so
but
what? So that's what you could do. But what would you propose you would normally do through
yeah,
the Git actions, GitHub actions and stuff?
yeah, absolutely. So
Okay, okay.
you go there, and then what you can do is you can even switch to the GitHub um, CLI if you have it. You
Oh
can
yeah,
create a
sure.
configuration file from this other CLI and push it, and then you have already CI/CD set up,
Oh,
and
that's
that's it.
very
And
cool because
that's it.
yeah.
That's going
So
to
so because it knows about the SWA config, it will set
exactly,
it up for you. Oh, that is
exactly.
nice integration. You know
Yeah.
what? I might have to revisit this for my YouTube channel and just have a look because this seems very smooth. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I think we are creating. And by the way, yesterday my friend Wasim, who led this CLI
Mhm.
from an engineering perspective, he opened a PR that is going to make this faster. The server actually
Mhm.
at a 72% gain.
What?
72% gain. Yeah.
And so is that the provisioning that becomes faster?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the interaction between the CLI and the deployed website
Okay,
after
that's
it.
awesome. How can you in this day and age still make 72% gain? That's crazy. He moved everything to Rust. Is that it?
Uh, no. It was actually a protocol thing, and it was a connection that was getting closed, and by keeping it alive, that was already a big gain. So just imagine, and
Sometimes
because
it's
it's
just
open
that.
source, we can
Yeah, you
totally,
can just find out. Yeah,
yeah.
I've been in projects sometimes where they didn't close a connection while you were browsing the website. And this was one of those monolithical systems that became headless, but like
Wow.
midway headless. So they didn't really know. And they didn't close a connection. And so when then 10 people would hit that page, it would open 10 connections and keep them open and not close them. And if 100 comes, it would DDoS itself,
Wow.
right? So connections open and
Yeah.
closed are very important.
Yeah, definitely. But it depends on what you're doing.
Sure,
If you
sure,
have
sure.
a multi-step process being executed, you probably want to keep it live for the time that this is happening, right? So you don't have to open 3 or 5 or 10 connections.
Exactly. So, Natalia, thank you so much for your
You're
time
welcome.
and the lovely slides and talking about all this stuff and coming on here because this was the first episode. So, I'm so happy we got like pro to help us out. So, thank you very much.
You're welcome. I just want to encourage people to play with micro frontends and
Oh,
compose their
yes,
architectures in a different way with the user and the user experience in mind.
exactly. And I think you conveyed that very well. And you were also very impressive by saying, yeah, I own things like VS Code and all the Azure stuff. And we're like,
The
holy
developer
crap.
experience in Azure. I want to make
Oh, I
like to
know. I know.
clarify that.
No, but
Yeah,
that's great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
And
you.
is there a last thing that you might want to plug that people should be doing, things like that?
No, but I want to mention that a lot of our tools are open source, and we are always happy to have contributions. And of course, find me in Twitter. Talk to me if you have any Azure questions related to a JavaScript workflow or application. Then I may be able to help you. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
and let me just remove the screen and then look at your name tag, and that's your Twitter.
Exactly, that's my Twitter.
So
My Twitter, my GitHub, my everything,
you're
basically.
everything,
Yeah.
exactly. And the same goes for me here. Here, yes. All right. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you soon. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Finding the